You're listening to episode 143 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Barbara Burns joins us to speak about her research, mindfulness-based, trauma-informed parent education in an underserved Latino community. If you're listening to this podcast and find value and insights from what is shared here, know that this is made available from your generosity and the generosity of others like you. I want to thank those of you who are making monthly donations to keep this podcast going. And if you're not yet, please take a moment, go to presentmomentmindfulness.com and click on Make a Donation. One-time or especially monthly donations show that you value this work, which can't happen without you. Thank you for your help, your support, and your kind generosity. Despite current hype to the contrary, secular mindfulness programs are making a very real and measurable difference in the world. Today we explore one such program, Safe, Secure, and Loved, and how that's helping disenfranchised families of color. Barbara M. Burns, Ph.D., is a developmental psychologist who studies self-regulation in children. Much of her career has focused on understanding attention and executive function skills across early childhood and exploring their significance for children's well-being and early school success. At Santa Clara University, she is working on a new family intervention called the Resilient Families Program. Barbara teaches courses in applied developmental psychology and child studies and hopes that learning about the science of child development incites students to actions on their behalf of children and families as citizens, professionals, and family members. My guest today is Barbara Burns. Barb, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Hello.
So let's start by having you tell us about your background before we dive into our main topic of the program that you've been working on.
Great. Well, I'm a applied developmental psychologist, which means I studied experimental psychology and trying to understand children's development. And for many, many years, I've been a professor my whole life, but for many years, I've focused on understanding the development of self-regulation in children, young children. And then as time went on, I moved my research towards trying to understand interventions or prevention work. And that took me in a lot of places, consulting work in public health, travel and working with orphanages, doing lots of different ways to understand different communities. And I was at University of Louisville in the psychology department for many years. And for the last 8 years, I've been at Santa Clara University in child studies, where we work on the whole child in the both academic world and in my research, and why you've asked me to come here.
It's great. And there's so much to unpack there from just your work with not just interventions, but also prevention. How do we prevent problems from arising in the first place? And also, you mentioned community, and the impression I'm getting is that, as expected, there's a lot of conditions. There's a whole environment that leads to what people are seeing and experiencing. And I'll want to talk a little bit more about that as we get into our main topic today. But it was just fascinating to hear that that's been part of your work all along. And so I'm eager to hear more about that. But let's start by talking about the Safe, Secure, and Loved, or SSL program. What started that? How did that get going?
Well, in a way, I've been working on Safe, Secure, and Loved for my whole career, but I didn't know it. As I said, I started really trying to understand how children become ready for kindergarten. Okay, so become self-regulated or be able to use executive function skills, as the term in the biz. And the more studies that we did and the more work we uncovered, the more we could see that it was the family and the community that was influencing the ability for children to develop this self-regulation. It wasn't very specific experiences, and it wasn't really even related to sort of traditional ways that people had studied intelligence or school readiness. So I kind of moved from thinking about how to understand the support of children, getting especially children who come from at-risk backgrounds, because that's really the population that I've worked with my whole life. How do we best support them? And it was clear, I spent at least 15 years going down a road of individual kind of interventions with a child and specific kind of attention training and et cetera, as did the whole field.
Yep.
And the more we understood, the more we could see that we need to kind of step back and think about the child in context, in the family and the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I compare that to just my own degrees in biology and studying wildlife, is the idea that you bring some wild animal and you put it in a tiny cage and try to understand what its behavior and feeding habits are like and all that. Of course, that's not going to work because you've taken it out of the environment in which it's in. And
yeah.
It sounds like the field that you're in is doing the same thing, looking at, there's a whole context behind what we're seeing here.
Yeah, we're going to turn you into a developmentalist by the end of this podcast. I'm successful. Anyway, so all along, when you're doing sort of traditional work like that, because that's how it was all done, we were also using sort of traditional interventions, like I won't name the names, but they're the well-known parent education interventions, and looking at, before and after and control groups, things like that. And I always felt very uncomfortable in the relationship between, the person giving the intervention and the parents receiving it, because often we worked with at-risk families, we worked with homeless families, court-ordered families that wanted to come and get parent education as a way to show that they were trying to work to get their children back or do a better job with their children, etc. And it was always this uncomfortable, I felt uncomfortable and I felt less than in the context of sort of top-down telling, prescribing what should happen. And so that's one of these things that over time I kept developing little sidebar experiences or activities or role plays in order to kind of change the dynamic in parent education such that the focus was on this is what children need, and we got to figure out how to make that happen rather than you have to do this in a certain way, or this is the only way, or these are the rules, you know. And that was a huge shift. So Safe, Secure, and Loved really was the culmination over many years of putting pieces together, having to do with supporting at-risk parents to really address the really fundamental issue in parenting, and that is to really connect with your child and really, not to be corny here, but make them feel safe, secure, and loved. That's really the whole deal. And so when I came to Santa Clara University, it kind of made a big step forward, although we were doing this in Louisville and we've been doing it in other places in the country. People have gotten interested in it, but we've really kind of moved it into a kind of a separate category. We even have a 501c3 for it in order for people to get the materials. So it developed over a long period of time. I mean, we're talking 30 years. Mm-hmm. And now we've been really doing it in earnest as an intervention, testing it for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I'm very curious about is, over the course of many years in developing this, you would have probably tried a few things that didn't work so well, and maybe dispensed with those, and tried other things that were, at least in appearances, seemed more effective. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about some of the things that are included in the program that you found have been very helpful.
Oh, sure. Well, so the program is all about strengthening resilience. So that's the focus. And it's 6 weeks long, or 6 workshops long. Usually it's once a week. And each week there's kind of a very very key element that has a symbol associated with it that sort of represents the main idea. So, for example, the first week, it's the anchor. And it's this idea that we talk about the anchor of resilience. So parents think about their strengths and how they have been able to manage. And what's been interesting and really what the community has taught me is how resilient parents are from the most at-risk communities. They have tremendous strengths. They're amazing, unbelievable people who are working against, odds that I can't even imagine. Right. So that's one of the things, is like realizing sort of, I think we have underestimated the strengths of at-risk parents. Mostly we focus on the challenges that they've had. So, again, in terms of what's worked, we have these very kind of main messages each week, and it's a manualized program, and we go through it's very specific in a way, but then the manual is set up as a discussion. And so what has worked the best is that the community's reaction, if you're sitting around a table with 7 or 8 or 12 or 15 is probably the most we do in a group. sitting around talking about, strengths, for instance, and what do you think your parenting strengths are, and how did you get those? That's the special sauce. That's the magic. The magic is how the community is reflecting on it and interacting with each other. So that's been the most wonderful thing, is what's happened since I came to Santa Clara, is that it's moved. I've done Safe, Secure, and Love for many years, as I said, but now it's really community, or it's organized such that it can be community led rather than top down. So it's kind of like I'm near the end of, I'm like not near the end, but I've been able to take myself out of the equation, literally and figuratively.
Well, in a way, this child that you have been raising is growing up enough to make it on its own and take care of itself, and that's really wonderful to hear. As in a different circumstance that I'm in, setting up a community, an in-person contemplative community, to take care of itself and not be dependent on a single charismatic person, but rather themselves, and taking ownership of that and having a separation so that they can do so. And what I really liked about what you've been saying is being able to really turn that light of strengths that people have upon themselves, so that they can recognize that it's not all just the challenges and the difficulties that they're facing, but also, as we say in MBSR, there's more right with you than wrong with you. Look at how much you've done. And being able to empower people in that way must be, I imagine, are very personally rewarding as you see people take that on.
Yes. I haven't started crying yet with glee during this interview, but I might in a moment. I mean, yes, it's amazing. And the amazing part is what people can do. And you brought up MBSR. One of the keys of this, and I know we'll get to this, but I have to jump in. One of the keys is the idea that mindfulness, or being introduced to this idea of mindfulness, or mindful breathing, or self-compassion practices, that's a key kind of piece of this program. And it allows kind of an avenue, or it allows an opening for people to kind of literally open up and be ready to change their thinking, really, about their relationship with their child, and what they can do. It's not even so, it's all about yourself. It always is all about yourself, but it's like to have parents recognize they have strengths and they have power to support their child. That's really amazing and great, but you can't do that if you're so stressed. I mean, if you're very stressed and you don't have a moment to think, you can't get there.
Right. So there was an article that really led me to you. And for those who are listening to the podcast, I'll just read the title, and then Barb, maybe you and I can unpack a little bit of that. The article is Mindfulness-Based Trauma-Informed Parent Education in an Underserved Latino Community. And there's so many different layers to that. But one of the things I wanted to start with is that trauma-informed aspect of that. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how that shows up in the program.
Well, thank you. And thank you for reading and finding that article. Well, one of the things that's really important to realize about parent education, well, everybody recognizes that parenting is a very personal thing, but it's also a generational thing. And so, when you come to be a parent, you are, the echoes of your own experience are right there with you. They say the past isn't in the past. It's not far away. It's not even in the past. It's the case that the experiences and the adversities that you had as a child can interfere with your ability and your reaction to what your child needs. So in other words, you've got a baby, and the baby makes all these demands on you, and there's a lot of reaction to that can be traced back to experiences you had in terms of when your needs were met or were not met. And so the idea that trauma as a element to reckon with and to recognize especially in families who have obviously faced a lot of trauma, violence in the community, historical violence and racism, and violence in the home, et cetera, and poverty overall. All of those things combined are things that we can't just sweep that under the rug and say, you need to do this better without approaching that. And again, this is where the mindfulness practices come in, where you have to get to a space that you're willing to, recognize that, you're reacting to something that isn't here in the present. You've got to get present, and in the present, this baby needs me, and that's kind of what the goal is in terms of understanding what's needed right now in this moment rather than the past. So trauma informed is almost like, I see it as, at the first layer, is recognizing how adversity and trauma influences all of our interactions, and especially how it hampers us. So we need extra help and support, especially as a new parent, because this program is for parents of young children.
So another aspect of this, which I'm wondering about, is that underserved Latino community part. And I'm wondering if you might just, on a personal note, say a little bit about why you find programs for underserved communities so important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I mean, for many of us, this is a social justice issue. The idea that everyone doesn't have knowledge and access to real information, scientifically based, effective information, it's a moral issue. And, I feel like that in Louisville, predominantly the families I worked with were from African American families, and that is really where in Head Start and early Head Start, a lot of my work developed. And then moving to Santa Clara, I had the opportunity to engage with the Hispanic community. And so, I've had this great joy to be able to be welcomed in by the different communities who are so similar to, we're all so similar in terms of every single family I've ever worked with wants the best for their children. And they want to know, everyone wants to know about brain development. They want to know this idea that parenting sculpts the brain, and they hear it, they want to understand it. And I think that's just really, that's the core of my commitment. It's both, it really drives the whole operation.
Yeah. So there's another part of the title of that article, and that was after the parentheses, and it was the emergence of a community workforce. I'm wondering if you might say a little bit about that part too.
Yeah. And that's really the most exciting part. And that is what happened in San Jose is that we did our Safe, Secure, and Loved. We did it in Spanish. I had bilingual students helping me and work to present this the first time. This is 8 years ago. And at the end of the 6 workshops, almost the whole class said, oh, we want to keep working with this. We want to help other people. Now, this had never happened to me. Like, at the end of any psychology experiment, really, people just want to leave. I mean, it's not that they didn't have a good time. It was engaging, but we're out of here. And it was very odd at first. Like, it was like, whoa, this is really crazy. They're all interested in this. And so they wanted to help the next group. And so I was like, well, this is great. Okay. And so basically that sort of, it was like a snowball building. So then I had about 7 people who in that next quarter, that next semester, wanted to help with the next group. So we had a lot of extra people who were sitting in a group. And then the people in that group wanted to help. And it was like, okay, I got to make a more formalized system here, because these people are getting so good at this. I can turn it over. I'm ready to. I was ready a long time ago to turn it over. But, I felt like we got in the special zone here of it was engaging enough and accessible enough and meaningful enough such that people wanted to continue with it and tell their friends and take it back to Mexico and bring it to their church and their school. And it was just like, wow, this is like rock star status for psychologists. It was pretty great. And basically what has happened, so that it's one thing to say, oh, great, you want to help. It's another thing, and again, this is about, authority and letting go and all that. It's another thing for me as a researcher to recognize that the promotoras, the promoters, who were helping us facilitate, at first they were just helping, and then they were helping a little more, and then we were co-helping, co-leading. But then what happened is I started recognizing more and more fully the way they were contextualizing certain ideas and the way they were responding to certain questions. It was better than anything I had. And it was better. It sounds like it's all on one scale. It was in a different world. It was like they were in the real world and I was in a meta world in a way. It's not that I'm undermining the program. It's just, okay, I'm good up to here, but now they took it to the neighborhood, to the family.
Right. There's a layer of personal experience that they have, which is outside of a context that you and I may have, and often researchers don't have. So bringing that in and seeing that grow is wonderful.
Yeah. And so now we have, I'm still working with the same nonprofit. There are about 5 women who are in the very first group who are still working with us, and it's volunteer. I mean, they have a small stipend, like for gas but it's a volunteer experience because it happens every once in a while. And now we have about 20 promotoras who are fully trained, and they go out in pairs, and they lead groups, and it's all coordinated. And really, it's the case that now the nonprofit, Sacred Heart Community Service is the name of it. The nonprofit is really running this program. I'm supporting them, and up to this year, we've done the data analysis for them, but we're actually teaching the promotoras how to do the data analysis this year. So that's the last shoe to drop. So that's been a kind of a miracle, because it has shown me, it has humbled me. I wish I could start my career over again, knowing now what I know. I would start where I am now. I think maybe everyone says that, but it is the case that I believe strongly that unless we come up with a new approach like this, in terms of the community owns, the healing, unless we come up with an approach like this, we're not gonna, we can't manage the level of trauma and the level of adversity and challenges that our families are dealing with. So yeah, so it was a real labor of love to write this paper, because it allowed us to go back and kind of analyze what the heck happened over these 5 years. Like, how did this happen? And it's kind of like implicitly, I kind of understood that as the promotoras became more knowledgeable and became more skilled and sophisticated, that it wasn't about me letting go. It was just like the whole program realizing they're the ones driving the ship, It was implicit, but by doing these interviews and really asking the promotoras and the staff and the people at the nonprofit, and even asking myself, other people asked me, and, we kind of were able to lay out what happened. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this paper.
So I'm wondering what recommendations you might make for people who are interested in doing this kind of work, and maybe not necessarily this program, but maybe something that touches the community. What might you recommend to them?
Yeah, my first reaction to that, it's like a mindset change, that when you think about, you think about any program out there that you want to bring to your faith-based institution, your library, your school, immediately try to rethink about it as something that's led by the community. How can this be a community partnership, a really authentic community partnership? Not just that, a lot of times you see that research is, community-based research, but community-based isn't the same as community-led or community co-led. And so my major message is that we have to rethink the way in which the science of whatever, resilience and parenting and, all the approaches we have, how we translate that to something that is meaningful in the community. How do we do that in really authentic ways with the community? That's my major message. My other advice is to start your own mindfulness practice. I thought you'd like that one.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one.
Start your own mindfulness practice. Get yourself together. It is the case that we're living in a world in which we have to really take control of our mental energy and our our regulation of self. In fact, the second week of Safe, Secure, and Loved, the symbol is the glass, and the idea is that we have to keep our glass full. And this is like, all my students are really into this too. They're all into the symbols as well. But keeping your glass full, realizing that it's your responsibility, like it's on you as a parent, as a student, as anybody, it's on you to manage your stress. I mean, it's not like, resilience isn't about not having stress or being able to easily manage everything. It's just about being able to address the challenges and grow from them. And gosh, we need those skills in today's world. It feels like we need them more than ever. Maybe that's not true, but I feel like everyone can take a step back and really look at the way they interact with their peers and with the people they're working with and for, in a different way.
Yeah. Well, for those who are interested in finding out more, I'll have some links on the episode page for this episode. Our guest today, Barbara Burns. Barb, thank you so much for being here, from sharing your experience, your wisdom in this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.